Thank you. Welcome to those watching online on YouTube. So the talk title for today is Monsters, Inc., and the theme is speaking truth to circumstance. And this is a reboot of the phrase we sometimes hear, especially in the political movement, speaking truth to power. Now, there are things that come up in our lives and we have a choice to speak up or speak into, or to bring power to our voice to take a position for something. But what we're talking about here is speaking truth to power. Spirit is the only power, right? So what people really mean when they're using the phrase is speaking to control our circumstances. So instead of speaking to power, I'm honest, I want to speak to control my circumstances in life. Oh. And circumstances are never truth with a capital T, truth. So we begin by looking those circumstances right there in the face as the monsters, quote unquote, monsters that they seem to be. But like in the movie Monsters, Inc., they are not what they seem, right? There's all those who've seen Monsters, Inc., it's where they're the nightmare factory that, you know, is hiding in the closet to give our kids the scare in the middle of the night, which in hindsight was kind of fun. But wind up being lovable, funny, creative, beautiful creatures. I kind of want that big hug from Sully. So despite appearances, nothing is greater than our understanding of the infinite presence. Ernest Holmes said in The Science of Mind, one alone in consciousness with the infinite constitutes a complete majority. One alone in consciousness with the infinite constitutes a complete majority. No 50% plus one wins the election, right? I just have to be one alone in consciousness. So when we attempt to fight outside circumstances, we only give those circumstances the power of our attention. And as Ernest Holmes said, the practitioner does not fight evil. They know there is no evil. There's nothing to fight. So when we engage with fighting with the outer, we are caught up in a belief in separation and have lost faith in our infinite oneness. Really, in so many ways, that is the root of all of our illnesses, maladies, sadness, is our false sense of separation from that one. This doesn't mean we sit in our prayer chairs and do nothing. It means we first gain that higher perspective so we can be most effective in the actions that we take. We are all equally the infinite in our expression. The only difference is the level of our awareness of that. In our minds, sometimes we build certain people and organizations into being the monsters that we need to do battle against. And in so doing, we give them the power that we're trying to assert. We give them power over something that isn't real. We give away our own power, which, by the way, is actually impossible to do, right? As we are always spirit informed, we can certainly feel powerless, but in reality, people who seem powerful are no more or less spirit than we are, right? They are no more or less spirit than we are. So we can shift and have feeling this sense of powerlessness where someone has power over me, but they don't. Organizations that seem powerful and immovable, you watch the news this week, there's some things that go along with that. They're made up of individual people who, again, are spirit informed, just like you are, just like I am. And that infinite sense of spirit is everywhere present. So as in the movie Monsters, Inc., the monsters turn out to maybe really not be monsters. And to know that there's some truth behind these actions of circumstances, that can be helpful. So the Starship Enterprise on Star Trek had something called the holodeck. right?
Yes.
Where crew members, through their thoughts, could create an amazingly realistic hologram experience via their thoughts, their wishes, and their intentions. In one episode, Worf used the holodeck to create a scene involving big-time fighting and savagery. And I remember wondering, why did he create the holodeck for violence when he could use it for any kind of wonderful fantasy? Worf created a highly realistic bad dream nightmare for himself. Does this sound familiar to any of you or me? Even those of us who believe that we are co-creators of our experience can let our lives become hard or even monstrous feeling. Why do we do that? In the past decade, an increasing number of scientists believe that, like the Star Trek holodeck, what we experience in reality is really a thought-created hologram. But it feels so real, doesn't it? Those other people, those monsters in our lives or monsters in our head. But imagine, merrily, merrily, life is but a dream. If only this were easy for us to believe. So the spiritual gurus Abraham Hicks suggests that we see thought as a train. The more we focus and ruminate on things that don't feel good, the more momentum we give that train of thought to go in that direction where we don't want it to go. The further that train gets down the track, the more momentum it builds. The harder it is to tap the brakes. And the more the struggle becomes, the harder it is to remember the truth of what we and our lives really are. If we ride our train in that direction long enough, life can become that nightmare. So a technique that therapists and life coaches utilize sometimes to process nightmares is to have a person relax and go into their dream. But rather than running from whatever is chasing them, ever been chased in a dream? Yeah. So go back into it, turn around and face it. My wife, Kim, and by the way, make a pitch. Kim is speaking here next Saturday. How exciting. I'm to have her here. She had a dream that she was being chased by a bear. No matter where and how fast she went, the bear was close to catching up with her. And as most of us do, she woke up just before the bear caught her. And so she was relieved that it wasn't real. But the remnants, the feelings of that dream stayed with her. Nonetheless, she consciously went back into the dream, and this time she didn't run, but turned toward the bear and let it catch her. When it caught up with her, the bear, guess what, didn't attack her as she feared. Instead, it wrapped her in the most loving and comfortable hug, like Sully. So when we get caught up in that illusion, life can feel like a bear chasing us. But the reality is there's only one thing chasing us, and that is love. Spiritual luminary Byron Katie, have you ever heard of her?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, very common to come up in our New Thought teachings. And we could do a whole talk on what she teaches. But she had written her train of thought, this recurring train of thought that built momentum into an almost nightmarish life for her, in which she saw, and more critically, she saw herself as a monster. She was a divorced workaholic, and even Byron's own children thought she was a horrible person. Byron got to the point that she felt so badly of herself that she chose to sleep on the floor because she didn't feel worthy to be in bed. Lying on the floor one night, she awoke to a cockroach walking across her leg. Nightmare right there. And rather than be disgusted, however, she saw the truth of the roach in all of life as loving light. She also had an epiphany that most of her thoughts and most of our thoughts are untrue. Says Byron, I discovered that when I believed my thoughts, I suffered. When I believed my thoughts, I suffered. But when I didn't believe them, I didn't suffer. And that this is the truth for every human being. Since then, she developed a technique to challenge any thoughts that have cropped up to have her feeling badly. And that technique became a best-selling book titled The Work. We'll do work on that some other time. But since coming up with this technique to liberate herself from untrue thoughts, even when she's gone into war-torn areas and someone has run at her with the intention to attack her, she says, I see love having a nightmare. The truth, the absolute pure truth of love behind the outside circumstances, that threat of attack is love having a nightmare. It's reported that once someone hits Byron's force field of love and truth, they not only cease the attack, but they have been known to fall in her arms weeping. Wow. The power of knowing the truth, that when my reptilian brain is saying I am in fear and I'm being attacked, to know that there is love beyond that, to have that force field be so strong that those who are in her realm in a fear-inducing way succumb to the sense of love. There is almost miraculous power in that ability to see the truth. For some of us in the world, not everyone, but climate change can be a monster and a nightmare. Think about the heat these days. And we're immersed in it, whether it's storms running through or winds that blow through in the middle of the night, or watching on TV and hearing scientists talk about that's us who created that. But the point is that issue is a wake-up call, not so much to reduce our carbon footprint, but to turn our train of thought away from focusing on what's happening that we don't want to envisioning what we do want and knowing the truth of the situation, which is that God, it's all God and it's all good. So that doesn't say we don't reduce our carbon footprint and reuse and recycle, but we do it with the perception that the earth is healthy and harmonious. Doesn't that make sense? So if I'm going to go into this and say, I need to buy an electric car or do all the things because I am in fear that the planet is about to implode, as opposed to saying, I'm going to make these choices about how I use the resources of the world, knowing that I love this earth and that it is in a harmonious place and that the cycles that we're experiencing, that this earth is healthy and harmonious. That translates into all the little things that happen in our lives too, right? Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith, we all know Reverend Dr. Michael, he doesn't watch the news. I do, kind of like it. But when he does happen upon the news, he sees the bad news that predominates what we see out there today as a prayer request. Being New Thought and the teachings that we have, he doesn't join with the masses and see the negative illusions of those situations, but instead holds each issue up to the light of truth, that all is love, light, and perfection. And just as Science of Mind practitioners hold the highest truth for their clients and spiritual centers, we hold the high watch on those issues. Doesn't mean we not may be called to protest and walk on the streets or support or oppose a candidate or call our legislators to bring out an agenda, but beneath it needs to be love, wholeness, an optimistic energy that change is possible and that behind it all is love. That is the truth behind it. Last Saturday, I had the amazing privilege of sitting on practitioner licensing panels. And this was for mostly our virtual practitioners. These are folks who've gone through all of their training virtually. and they're supporting different centers and teachings around the world. So I got to sit with two practitioners and then the practitioner candidate in front of me to see them demonstrate this amazing light and to hear their stories of how they moved into this teaching. One of the things I loved about it was there was one person who came to this knowing nothing about science of mind, but got a challenge from their daughter to do something different during the pandemic while they were locked in the house. And that took reaching out online and taking a class with Centers for Spiritual Living, about spirituality. Fast forward 3 years later, and they're a practitioner, like teaching this powerful truth and sharing how it shows up in their family. So this reminds me of what it is to be a practitioner and to know that we have a newly licensed practitioner amongst us right now. Yeah. So let's give Brad some love. And then we'll move on. So but there are thousands of licensed practitioners in the world with Centers for Spiritual Living, and they have one job, and that is to know the truth beyond the outward experiences and circumstances in our lives. And to know that, and Melita's looking at me like, I do it all the time. We have two practitioners at our center now. Yes. It is their job to know the truth and also to be human and know that we all have triggers and things that come up. But to make a pitch, that these practitioners have the ability to sit with you, to hear your life circumstances, to let your life experiences flow through them and right out the back, to know the deeper spiritual truth beyond that, to hold that in prayer so that it can become manifest in this world. And it's so simple. We make it complicated here at CSL sometimes because Ernest Holmes is a very heady guy and I love him. But it really is as simple as when the cockroach walks across your leg, when you're sleeping on the floor because you can't get up and you're not worthy of being in the bed, to know that all of this is an expression of love. And that as we turn to that and know the love beyond the deeper piece of our circumstances, so true can we have that experience of life. So there is so much good in what we do. There's so much recognition that power is an absolute truth. It is an aspect of what we call God or spirit. That's capital P, power. And let's not give power to the circumstances in our lives. Observe it, recognize it, give thanks for it, know the deeper truth, call someone to help you know that the truth of your experience, and together we can illuminate, uplift the energy on our planet and maybe cool it down a little bit. And so it is. Thank you so much. I'm going to do a quick